So I guess it's true that God really does use crooked sticks to make straight lines. So I guess it's true that God really does use crooked sticks to make straight lines.
Good evening. Good evening. I did wonder this morning, actually, Claire, whether to do a bit of a stunt. I was going to go up to the back with the mic because I was service leading this morning, and as you were about to start to preach, I wondered whether I was going to go to Maddie and say, "Look, Maddie, come, stop being busy with all the coffees. Claire's about to preach. You need to come and sit down." Decided not to go with it in the end, but so I've got the talk of Mary and Martha, which. Great. I thought that sounded like a nice one to do. I love the story. And then I found out it was in the series of Fools and Failures. And it didn't naturally fit with me. So why this story with Fools and Failures? I mean, to me, it's more about discipleship, about evangelism. It's about giftings, perhaps, and what we like to do for God. Not particularly Fools and Failures. But I'm going to start by saying that, if we can have the first slide up, please. We've got sort of 4 W's I thought we could have a little go at. What do you think these 4 symbols might represent? They are linked to the story of Mary and Martha. They're all 4 W's. It's one fairly obvious one. Anyone want to guess? Work. Yeah, the first one is work. Yeah. Worry. Second one. Yeah. Worship. Yeah. And women. Yeah. So they all appear in the story. Worship is going to be sort of thinking more about Martha being at Jesus' feet, worshipping him before we then get into... anyway, that was a little bit fun. Next one, please. So this is one artist's impression of what the scene looked like. And you can see sort of Mary sat there at Jesus' feet, Jesus looking up at Martha. Martha, she has that kind of worried look on her face, doesn't she? So I'm sure you probably know the story, but I'm going to read through it from the Bible in a moment. But the story comes in Luke's Gospel, and it comes on the back of lots of stories about God's provision. So we've had the feeding of the 5,000. There's also been feeding of another 4,000 people, where they're miraculously fed from just the loaves of fishes and bread. We've got the sending out of the 72. Claire, you had a lovely picture this morning when you talked about the sending out of the 72. And how they went out without anything. Jesus didn't even let them have sandals on their feet as they went across the dusty roads. They had to walk with nothing and be provided for when they got to the places they stayed. And it also comes after the story of the Good Samaritan, where we have an unexpected character, where the Samaritan is the one who cares for the beaten, battered Jewish man lying on the road who's been beaten up and provides for his needs, takes him to a hostel, a hotel, and then provides for his medical care until he's restored. So there's these stories of miraculous provision on the back of Mary and Martha. Okay. So, and the story takes place in Bethany, so Jesus had started his journey to Jerusalem. So he sent the disciples out to the 72 villages, towns, and they've come back. And then Jesus is going to visit these places on his route to Jerusalem. And this is most likely in a town called Bethany, where Mary and Martha lived. So let's read the story then. Or the account. I keep saying story, because in children we talk about children's stories, don't we? But this is the account written in the Bible by Luke. From Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So just sort of 5 short verses in this. We haven't got the whole of Samson like you had last week. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here we have this scene again. My take on it is less a sort of timid, worried Martha. Mine is more of this. Because Claire was talking about impulse control, wasn't she? And I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. I certainly have at home, where I'm just trying to get everything ready. I'm being really busy. There are plenty of people around in the house. Any one of them could come and help me, and it's bottling it up, and I'm getting more and more frustrated to the point where I just walk into the room and I just snap and go, ah! And everyone looks at me going, what's the matter? So maybe it was a bit more like that. I don't know. But I think there's this sort of anger, frustration that's coming out. It was enough. It was significant enough a moment in front of all those people for it to go down in history and for us to talk about it 2,000 years later. So to me, it wasn't a quiet, timid, little quiet word with Jesus. I think maybe it was more significant. So I'd like you to think, in terms of fools and failures for this parable, who would you see as the fool or the failure in this parable? Would you see it as Mary? Would you see it as Martha? So I want you to hold in your head who you would choose out of the two as fools and failures, because I had to try and work that one out. Thanks, Matt. So on the one hand, Martha appears to be the foolish one. Here she is. She's missed the point. She's been really busy behind the scenes trying to get ready. She feels like she's justified in going in and saying to Jesus, don't you care about me? Now, how foolish is that? I mean, of all the people to go up to say, don't you care about me? She goes and picks the most caring person the entire planet has ever known. You know, that's pretty foolish. Has she missed a point? Does she not realise what's happening? Have you ever been in the position where you've got really wound up or annoyed with something at work, and then you've gone to have a moan to the boss, or maybe you've gone to have a moan to God about it, and instead of him doing what you want, or her doing what you want, it's your boss, and going, it's okay, don't worry, sit down, I'll sort it out, I'll get them to help you, actually they turn around and start to look at you and start to tell you perhaps how you might be not seeing the situation in the right way? I can certainly think of a few times where I've wanted one answer. Martha wanted Jesus to tell Mary to come and help. And instead, she gets a completely different response from Jesus. Interestingly, though, in the story, Jesus doesn't then say, look, stop what you're doing, come and sit in the room, come and sit down, come and join Mary. He doesn't tell her to do that. He still leaves it, or she might have done, it's not written down. But she leaves it as Martha's choice as to what she does. I've also, as 4 W's, I've got 4 C's that we'll see you pick up on this one. So, conditions. In this story, in this society, it was the men would have had the room, the place of the teaching. They would have been in the temple, they would have had their own place. It wouldn't have been for the women. The women would have been in the back rooms doing the cooking, sorting things out. Oh, by the way, Martha's actually the patron saint of women for cooking. Not for women, she's the patron saint of cooks. That's what I meant to say. It was an unexpected place for Mary to be. Mary has done the really foolish, crazy thing. She's gone into the men's room to sit on the men's floor to listen to Jesus. She hasn't been rejected. She hasn't been thrown out. She's been accepted as Jesus, by Jesus to come into that place. He doesn't have a problem with it. And because she's there, obviously the disciples and the others around don't have a problem. And when I started to read this passage, I was reading it on International Women's Day. We were talking about in school about amazing things that women have done. And so from our concept of men and women being equal and having equal access to God, this seems really not right, that men and women were separated. And as a school, we help with a charity that works in Morocco called Education for All, where women and teenage girls don't have as much opportunity to go to school, and we want to really enable that to happen. So we raise money and we support that charity. And it also came to mind that all those girls in Afghanistan who were desperate to go back to school who weren't being denied that. So there's a sort of an injustice, isn't there? Which makes us feel a bit uncomfortable, perhaps, when you look at the story in that respect. So she's done the crazy thing. She's going against that injustice, that choice of you shouldn't be in this room. She has been the fool in the eyes of her society in choosing to go and do that. Mary the fool, Martha the fool. There you go. I was looking at both sides. Jesus definitely broke with convention. If you have the next slide here. If you think about all the stories we recount where Jesus breaks out of that mold. The woman at the well who had many husbands. He goes and he knows what her life is like before she said anything. He just already knows. Or actually, Mary in this story is the same Mary who broke a jar of alabaster oil and poured it on Jesus' feet to anoint him before he went to Jerusalem where he was crucified. Or maybe the Garden of Gethsemane where we think that Jesus met with women in many different occasions. So he definitely was not locked into this male-female kind of boundaries that they had in their society, but he was living in that society at the time. We go to counsel, next one. So going back to Martha, she bursts into that room in whatever way it was, and Jesus just doesn't reprimand her, doesn't tell her to go and get on with the work. He doesn't just say stop and sit down. He actually goes and, Martha uses her name twice. He sort of, calm down, it's okay, Martha. I know you by name, I'm using your name. He repeats it twice. And then he goes on and he offers counsel. He actually offers her advice. He doesn't just talk about the incident that's there. He goes, you worry about many things. What's at the heart of how she's feeling? She's worried about lots of things. And it's probably not just the preparation for the meal and where they are and what they're doing. She probably could have gone in and asked some people to help her. And Jesus is getting to the deeper worries. I don't know, maybe she's worried about what's going to happen when Jesus gets to Jerusalem. I don't know what those deeper worries were, but Jesus knew how she felt and what she thought. And so he jumps in on that and he says to her, don't worry. We've got lots of passages in the Bible, haven't we, about not how we shouldn't worry. Jesus is showing that true wisdom, that true understanding. And he does that for us. When we bring our concerns to Jesus, he knows what our true worries are. He knows what's hidden in our heart. He can cut right through to that, and then he can speak to us in wisdom and in knowledge. Next one, please. Oh, concerns, yeah. I'll go back one. I'm just wondering whether this might come up in the questions later, I think, whether you might side with being more like Mary or more like Martha. Personally, if I had to choose one, I would say I am much more like Martha. And I know that's part of my identity. Even as a little toddler, my mum recounts the fact that I used to always go around shouting, "Doey, doey, 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 doey," because I was into doing everything. Opening doors, cupboards, climbing up things, doey, 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 doey. I had to be busy the entire time. I must have been a nightmare as a toddler. And behind the scenes is where I like to be. I like to be helping and being busy behind the scenes. Even my father-in-law, when he first met me, and I went round to Kath's house, we sat down, we had a meal, spaghetti bolognese. I remember it because it's really hard to make a good impression when you're eating spaghetti bolognese. But I quickly escaped afterwards and was doing the washing up. And he just came in and found me doing all the washing up. And we couldn't understand why, as the guest, I would be in the kitchen doing the washing up. But for me, that's what you do, surely. It was in my makeup that I like to help. I like to be in that role. I don't think Jesus is saying that it was wrong that Martha should be trying to do the providing. She was trying to do the right thing and prepare, wasn't she? She probably could have got some of the other disciples to come and help if it was necessary. Or maybe they could have done it half an hour later. But at that point in that time, Mary had made the right choice in sitting at Jesus' feet. And Martha had that opportunity too, and she was missing out on it. Sometimes we can be so busy with life that maybe we miss out at sitting at Jesus' feet. It's good when we take time like we've done now, when we worship God, when we come before him, when we sit down. You've done that right now. You've chosen to sit here because you want to give up some of your time to hear what God's saying to you. So concerns. We often have concerns, but if you think about the fact this story has been placed by Luke following on from all these different things that God has provided, feeding the 5,000, Jesus doesn't need a meal prepared for himself. He could just make one appear, I'm sure, if he wanted to. It's just a reminder that we don't need to be worried and concerned, or if we are worried and concerned, we can bring those to God and we can get them put in perspective of what really matters. And then there's one last C, which is, if we slip to that slide. Oh yeah, I'll read this one because I think this sums up the worry bit. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they are? It's a lovely passage, isn't it? Just to remind yourself from a place of worry. And then last one, then please, is confession. It's an unusual word, but I was trying to stick to C's. Confession was there. After the story of Mary and Martha appear again. I don't know if you can think about where it happens. Same two ladies, same two women appear again. This time, it's because their brother, because they're sisters, their brother Lazarus has died. He's been dead for 4 days, and then Jesus, who's also a really good friend, he loves Lazarus, he loves Mary, he loves Martha, he comes to them. And we get a different response. Instead of you got Martha behind the scenes being too busy and not being with Jesus, and Mary sitting at his feet, you get the opposite. It flips. Martha is the one who rushes out to meet Jesus. And Mary's the one who stays sat at home with the mourners, all the people who have come to the house. So don't get locked into this idea that Martha and Mary are two characters and they're locked into that. And Martha's always the busy one and Mary is never the busy one, or the one who's sitting on her backside. Okay? Here we got Martha is the one who rushes out to Jesus. And the reason I said confession is because Jesus gives her an opportunity to say who she thinks he is. And in this one, it's Martha who proclaims that Jesus is the Messiah. She said she's no longer worried. She's not worried about Lazarus who's died. She says, I know that Lazarus will rise again. I'm not worried about him. I know, Jesus, that you're the Messiah. I know that God will give you whatever you ask. And then she rushes off and gets Mary, and then Mary rushes off to Jesus. So they do sort of get together, if you like. And I was in school, I was doing the parable of the sower. And to me, you've got a moment here where the seed that falls amongst thorns, if you remember that parable, the thorns are worries of this world. And sometimes the worries of this world can fall up and get around us and choke us. So even though we know the truth, our worries can prevent us from growing in our faith. But here, Martha, she's got through the worries. She's listened to this passage that we had. She's no longer worried. She has come into revelation of who God is. She's become that seed on good soil. And in that good soil, she's flourished, she's grown. She is prepared to publicly profess that Jesus is the Messiah. And she's one of the first people to do that. Like Martha, just because I might find it easier to do things quietly behind the scenes it doesn't diminish my desire to go and spread the good news, to confess to others my faith of who Jesus is. But also, like Mary, I know that I need to read and listen to God's word so that I can grow in his wisdom. So I'm going to finish by saying, are you more like Mary and Martha? I'm probably both. I want to be both. I might have tendencies to be more like Martha, but I also know the value of spending time with Jesus. And living, in terms of that confession, living as Christians can sometimes seem like foolishness to those around us. So I'm going to finish by saying, fools and failures, maybe I'm the fool. If I go and tell non-Christians about who God is, it can seem pretty foolish and crazy. But I'm prepared to be the fool and to tell them about who Jesus is. Now, are you prepared to not just give time to sitting at Jesus' feet, but are you prepared to get up and profess and confess who he is and share that with others too? 1 Corinthians says, chapter 1, verse 18, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." It may seem foolish to them, but to me it's the power of God working in me.